Today, I want to talk with you about one evidence-based practice you can implement into your classroom to support the success of students with disabilities and to encourage reading fluently. We're going to look at what repeated reading is, what makes it an evidence-based practice, and how to apply it in your classroom. I will go through a sample lesson with you to show just how easy the repeated reading strategy can be integrated into instruction. The repeated reading strategy was developed by S.J. Samuels in order to facilitate automatic decoding skills with unskilled or poor readers. It involves having students orally reread a passage until a fluency criterion is achieved. The report of the National Reading Panel defines a fluent reader as one who is able to read orally with speed, accuracy, and proper expression. Here is a sample fluency chart that is used for evaluation. This sample is only set up for 2 readings, but you could easily create your own for as many readings as you'd like. This example also provides a rubric for expression. The goals of repeated reading are to increase the speed of word recognition and make decoding automatic, thus enabling the reader to concentrate on the meaning of the text. Samuel suggested that in rereading a passage, speed should be emphasized over word recognition accuracy, and that student progress through passages should occur when they meet a specified fluency criterion, for example, 89 words per minute for a second grade student. He asserted that this manner of rereading a passage to a criterion of fluency increases word accuracy and comprehension. Non-fluent readers often read word by word, resulting in slower, less accurate decoding. If this practice is left unaddressed, these non-fluent readers understand less of what they read. In addition, they may fall behind their peers and struggle to enjoy reading. Students in intermediate grades begin to receive more coursework that requires the ability to read fluently and comprehend the material. Brzezinski and Paddock found that typically poor vocabulary and comprehension are often faulted for low performance. They believe, however, that competencies from earlier stages of reading development, such as decoding and fluency, are to blame. When students have difficulty in developing accurate and fluent reading skills, it reduces their ability to learn to read for meaning because they have to stop, decode, and reread. When this occurs, reading becomes frustrating and laborious, and students may begin to dislike reading in general. Students must be equipped with appropriate decoding strategies in order to achieve greater automaticity in word recognition, which then allows them to focus more on comprehension. Reading fluently can become a difficult task for students with learning disabilities. Decoding words can become a struggle, so they end up spending most of their time attempting to decode rather than reading for comprehension. The report of the National Reading Panel states, if text is read in a laborious and inefficient manner, it will be difficult for the child to remember what has been read and to relate the ideas expressed in the text to his or her background knowledge. By reading passages multiple times, students are able to focus on the content of what they are reading instead of reading isolated words. This improves both word recognition and comprehension skills. A study by Guerin and Murphy found the repeated reading experience motivated these otherwise reluctant adolescent readers to read with confidence and enthusiasm. This same study asked student participants what advice they might give to struggling readers, to which one responded, "Read it over twice," indicating an awareness of the usefulness of the strategy. The study showed an increase in reading accuracy and comprehension, though one of the students did end up reading at a slower pace, perhaps to pay more attention to the content of the text. This study demonstrates that generic reading instruction fails to provide individual, varied learning experience that evidence-based practices such as repeated readings do. Repeated reading is a strategy that struggling readers and students with disabilities can utilize to engage with the text confidently and at a deeper level. A critical component of repeated reading is immediate corrective feedback, or error correction. Error correction is made if a student mispronounces or stumbles on a word or hesitates for a given amount of time. The student repeats the word correctly and continues to read. A study by Sukram and Manda Amaya compared growth between students who received corrective feedback during oral repeated reading and students who did not receive corrective feedback. Both groups made growth in fluency skills. However, the students who received corrective feedback showed a statistically higher increase in comprehension questions following the text. This study demonstrates how corrective feedback can engage students more deeply with a text. Repeated reading, when implemented effectively and with fidelity, can help students with disabilities become more fluent readers. It can also help them to engage with the text on a deeper level and increase their understanding of what they read. In the next section, I will be discussing how to effectively implement repeated reading into your classroom. Repeated reading was initially designed as a one-to-one intervention. Unfortunately, classroom and time constraints do not allow for many individual interventions. Fortunately, this strategy is one that can be implemented in a variety of grouping patterns to provide that individualized assistance and support during instructional time. There is very little preparation time needed outside of finding an appropriate reading passage. There is also repeated reading software called Read Naturally, which offers a variety of programs which makes extra prep virtually non-existent. When using the repeated reading strategy, typically a student sits in a quiet space with a teacher and will read a passage ranging from 50 to 200 words in length. They read the passage for 1 minute. If a student misreads a word, the teacher says the word and the student repeats it correctly. If a student hesitates more than 5 seconds, the teacher says the word and the student repeats it correctly. If the student asks for help with a word, the teacher reads the word aloud or gives a definition of the word. The student will then reread the passage until a satisfactory level of fluency is achieved, typically 3 times. Repeated reading can be done in small group instruction with a more proficient peer or reading partner or one-on-one with an adult. The student can also practice reading into a recording device and play back what he has read as self-assessment. Once the student finishes practicing and self-monitoring his reading, he can read to you individually. As you now know, it is essential to pair repeated reading with immediate feedback and effective instruction in order to increase reading fluency, accuracy, and comprehension. Here is a sample passage that has been adapted from the Sylvan Learning Center. For our purposes today, we will only be looking at the first paragraph. For this lesson, you would need the following materials: 1 copy of the passage per student, 1 copy per student for you to use for assessment, a timer, a pen or marker to circle missed words. I like to introduce what our learning objectives are for my students at the start of each lesson so they know what we are working toward and what the expectations are. Here are my objectives. The student will read from on-level text with increasing fluency and accuracy. The student will demonstrate fluency during oral reading of on-level text by acknowledging punctuation. Now we are ready to begin. Grab student attention by explaining that good readers practice reading fluently. They read with accuracy or read only what is written. They practice self-correcting any words they make a mistake on, and they also read at a good pace, like they are speaking with a friend. Punctuation helps to know when to pause. This is meant to remind students of what they have learned so far and what skills they should be paying attention to as they begin reading. Next, you'll want to review what you've already learned. Ask students what kinds of strategies they can use to read words. Ask students what it means to read with accuracy. How can they make sure they are reading accurately? Answers might include self-checking as you read and adjusting your pace of reading when you read familiar words or when you come across tricky words. Then you'll want to preview what you'll be doing in the lesson. When we practice reading fluently, sometimes we read passages more than once. This helps to practice tricky words, read all words correctly, and to read at a good pace so we can understand what we have read. Today we will practice some new vocabulary words and then read a passage several times to practice reading fluently. Then we will answer some questions about what we have read. It is important to equip students with the words they will need to know in order to understand the content of the lesson. I would suggest introducing the academic language prior to any reading. Choose words from the passage that might be frequently mispronounced or are likely unfamiliar. Briefly define each word for students. You might give the dictionary definition as well as a kid-friendly definition. For example, the dictionary definition of the word renewable means capable of being replaced by natural ecological cycles or sound management practices. That might be a tough definition for students to grasp, so you might break it down into something more manageable, something that can be used or replaced repeatedly. It can't be used up. You can have students help with writing a definition as well. In front of the whole group, read a sample sentence or paragraph 4 times, once too slowly, once too quickly, once with uncorrected errors, and once with accuracy and at a good pace. You can use non-examples to model for students how fluent readers do not read, paired with an example of how fluent readers should read. Be sure to check in after each non-example and example to identify why we do or do not read this way. Here are 3 non-examples and 1 example of reading fluently. There are many reasons to use alternative energy sources. One reason is to reduce pollutants and greenhouse gases. Think about what happens to understanding when I read each word one by one. Was the idea easy to understand? Alternative or renewable resources help to reduce the amount of toxins that are a result of traditional energy use. What happens to ideas when I read too fast? Were they easily distinguishable from each other? These alternative energy suits help protect against the harmful byproducts and help to presence many national resources that we currently use as energy sources. Think about why uncorrected errors prohibit fluent reading based on my example. What happened to the meaning of the text? There are many reasons to use alternative energy sources. Alternative or renewable sources help to reduce the amount of toxins that are a result of traditional energy use. These alternative energy sources help protect against the harmful byproducts and help to preserve many natural resources that we currently use as energy sources. There are many types of alternative energy sources. How did that example demonstrate fluent reading? After each reading, have the class give a thumbs up or thumbs down to indicate if they could understand what you read. Ask questions like I did about each example. Explain today that they will be practicing reading fluently or reading with accuracy and at a good pace. Students will pair off to practice their first readings. I would recommend pairing students yourself ahead of the lesson, placing a more fluent reader with a less fluent reader so that good fluency skills can be modeled. Provide the passage for students to read silently for a few minutes before reading out loud. Once both students have completed reading silently, they can take turns reading to each other for 1 minute at a time. While students are working independently, call each student back one by one to read aloud to you for 1 minute. Be sure that each student has had the opportunity to read out loud at least once to their partner before they read to you. Circle each word that the student says incorrectly or pauses for more than 5 seconds on. After 1 minute, have the student tell you a short summary of what they read. Note that 1 minute reads can be done over the course of a few days if there isn't time to hear each student in one class period. While students are working in pairs, they can monitor each other for understanding and fluency. This is the nice thing about heterogeneous groupings. They may assist each other with their understanding of the text. Students can also monitor their reading. You would need to ensure that you have established rules and regulations that demonstrate respect for all students, their input, and their learning. You may need to enrich or scaffold this lesson depending on the learning needs of your class. Here are some ideas to show how you might add on to the lesson that might also aid with overall comprehension of the text. Allow beginning readers to illustrate what they've read if time allows. Encourage students to retell the sentence or paragraph in their own words. Have students give a brief summary of what they've read. Challenge fluent readers to model reading for the rest of the class and allow them to read in a silly voice. When you close your lesson, you'll want to review what your objectives were and how you've met them. You'll also want to gauge student understanding. One simple way to do so is in the form of a sentence starter. Give an example, such as reading fluently means, and have students write their responses. This allows you to monitor who really grasped the content and who might need more practice. Students can also chart their own progress. Using something like the example shown here allows students to track their own progress with the passage. On this recording sheet, students can record the number of words they read and subtract missed words to find their words read per minute. If you are comfortable with having the students check in with you once they've improved their words per minute, Doing so is an alternative option to you calling them back. It also gives you time to circulate and monitor while they practice. Once they have checked out with the teacher, they can take their data and graph it accordingly. This gives students ownership of their progress, and it also gives you evidence of growth. I hope that after our time here you feel confident in implementing the repeated reading strategy into your classroom. This is such a versatile strategy that allows students to engage with their reading while reinforcing critical skills. When your students focus less on the decoding of words and more on the meaning of words, they can develop a deeper level of comprehension and feel more confident in their reading ability.